Here's something to ponder. Political TV ads. This is a season where, at least in the two states where I live, New Jersey where I'm from and Maryland where I go to school, we have been inundated and they are being thrown at us as if it's going out of style. We have the Virginia gubernatorial, that's a long word, gubernatorial election between Terry McAuliffe and our good friend Ken Cuccinelli this November. And in New Jersey, we have a race between Babs Buono and the Christianator. And I've been seeing a ton of ads. So what I think is interesting about ads, and I'm not really going to talk here about whether they're successful or not, or do they really sway independence, or I'm not going to talk about the whole political impact of the ads, but I want to talk about the ads themselves. Something that I've noticed about a lot of ads, and one in particular that I'm going to talk about today, is that they're not entirely wrong, but they're not entirely right either. The ads are right in the sense that a lot of what they say is about the other candidate. I'm talking about attack ads mostly. What they say is usually right about the other candidate, but it's just in the wrong context. For instance, college students, and they all do this, and sometimes I do it, everybody does it, we can admit it. You take a quote from a book that you're supposed to have read the whole book, where you probably only read half of it, and you put that quote in your essay. And you hope that by not including the sentence before the quote and the sentence after the quote, you can shape the quote to the context that you want it to be in. And you just hope that the TA who's grading your paper is not going to take out the book and read 2 pages before it, 2 pages after it, for all 30 quotes that you have in your paper, and the 30 other papers that he or she is grading. And that's exactly what we do when we make political ads. They're right in that the information they use is usually factually correct, but they're wrong in that the context is wrong, or they don't give a full explanation of why the information is true. For instance, a huge ad that Chris Christie has put out, and that he's talked about in the first governor debate, and Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno has talked about in her debate, and I'm sure that he'll bring it up again. It's his, major attack ad against Barbara Buono, that in her 20 years in the legislature, she's voted to raise taxes 154 times. And I have 2 things to say about it. First, only 154. I figured it'd be more. That was a joke. I like that one. See? People who say never criticize Democrats or make Democrat jokes. There you go. I just made one. But, now I have not gone out and looked at all 154. So I'm going to make the assumption, and it's a big assumption, that the governor's campaign is correct. Let's say that she did vote 154 times to raise taxes. In 20 years, so if you take, let me divide this. 100, I'm using a calculator on my computer, divided by 20 years, that's only 7.7 times a year. But what's interesting is that, think about this. 154 might be correct, but it's in the wrong context. For some of you who understand the legislative process, what I'm about to say will make sense. If you don't understand the legislative process, all the keywords that I'm using, look them up. Now, she may have voted 154 times to raise taxes, but a lot of those were probably procedural votes in committee. There may have been amendment votes in committee. There may have been votes to take the bill, pass it from the committee, and now put it onto the state Senate floor. It may have been procedural votes on the state Senate floor. It may have been amendment votes on the state Senate floor. And it may have been final passage on the state Senate floor. And maybe it was a veto override vote on the Senate floor. So although, yes, she probably voted 154 times, it may have actually only been on 3 or 4 different bills. She didn't vote to raise taxes on 154 different bills. A lot of these were multiple votes. If you look, there might have been 30 votes on one bill between markup in committee, amendments in committee, procedural votes in committee, bringing it to the state Senate floor, votes on the floor, amendment votes on the floor, and final passage. And then, as I said, if the governor vetoed it, they need to override it. And yes, I will admit, Barbara at some point did vote to raise taxes. But most of those taxes are on things that reasonable, good people would agree and admit should be taxed. So gambling, alcohol, tanning beds, tattoos, gasoline, gas guzzling cars. I could probably sit here and think of 10 other ones, but most of those things that she voted to raise taxes on, I'm not here to defend her. But most of the things that she raised taxes on were things that most people would agree nobody wants their gasoline to be taxed or their lottery ticket to be taxed or anything to be taxed. But we would admit that, yes, to some extent, there has to be some degree of taxation. We can admit that. Even, I think the Tea Party can admit that. Well, maybe not the Tea Party, but they should be able to admit that there should be at least a little bit of taxation. So, I'm not here to defend Barbara Buono and to criticize Christie, but that's just the ad that I'm using as an example. So when Chris Christie goes out and says, Barbara Buono voted 154 times to raise your taxes, he's right, but he's wrong. And this is where we hit the fine line of politics. Politicians love taking things out of context and exaggerating the truth because they're not lying, but they're not being truthful either. So stay pondering, America, and look out for those commercials because you're going to start noticing it. Now that if you watch more and more political commercials, you're going to realize that this happens all the time. I wish you luck in sifting through that baloney.